Welcome back to Fast Market. I'm Alex Coffey, joined by Kevin Hanks, and I'd like to welcome in our next guest for our hashtag segment. That is Mr. Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, joining us now. Andy, always a pleasure. Long time no talk. Hope all is well. Thanks for taking the time and joining us here. We're talking some Pepsi here ahead of its earnings release. What are your initial thoughts here on this company based off your guys' data?
Yeah, overall, we're really going to focus on the beverage segment of Pepsi. I think that's probably the most relevant to their revenue and earnings going forward. You know, this is a highly volatile space. Beverage is very, very competitive. And, you know, with kind of the reopening, I guess you could say, although we're at the tail end of that, it feels like it does have an enormous impact on a company like Pepsi because their distribution into restaurants just isn't as good as Coke's. You know, but overall, when we look at, you know, Pepsi, it's the drinks, the breadth of the portfolio is what's really impressive. I think they've got this Izzy drink, which is a, you know, non-sugar fruit drink. I think that one is getting the most buzz right now by a considerable margin. Really good growth year over year, and it really emphasizes what we're seeing at LikeFolio is that if it's low sugar or no carbonation, you've really got a shot. Those are the two trends that are kind of taking the market by storm. From an energy drink perspective, which I think is enormously important, you know, we're seeing Pepsi has kind of, you know, abandoned, I wouldn't say abandoned, but it's kind of distanced itself from its acquisition of Rockstar, which has been a little bit of a dud for the company, but instead has gone to a minority stake in CELH energy drinks, which I think is a really good move because that's the winner in the entire field right now. You know, CELH is its own company, but Pepsi's taken about an 8.5% minority stake. It's going to help them with distribution, get a foot in the door for a potential acquisition, I believe, down the road, and latch on to what could be the biggest winner in the fastest growing segment, which is energy drinks, which are really popping year over year as people get more and more back into an active lifestyle outside of, you know, moving from their bed to their Zoom call in the kitchen. And so that's what we're seeing at Pepsi right now from a beverage standpoint. We think, you know, it's difficult for them to get the penetration that Coke has from restaurants, so they have to do it on the grocery shelves and in the gas stations. And they're doing a pretty good job of that with some new products that they have in this relationship with Celsius.
Andy, we focused this show on beverages today, and we focused on Coke, Pepsi. We're looking at Monster in our third segment. But the more research you do into this beverage segment, the more you hear about Celsius. And the more you hear about, this is not a very big company, right? It's not near the size of a Monster, which is now equal to Red Bull. It's not near the massive size of Coke and Pepsi. But you're right, this might be the fastest growing and most popular of these beverage brands right now. What do they do that Monster and these other firms don't do? Is it more of a weight loss? Is it more of a healthy energy? What are they doing differently?
Yeah, I really think it is around health. And I think it's this idea that you can have an energy that comes from a little bit more of a healthy source. I think people are starting to shy away from, you know, that kind of energy drink that's just in your face, feels like it's a bunch of chemicals, like a liquefied pixie stick with caffeine injected. You know, people are kind of getting away from that a little bit, which is what I feel like when I drink a Rockstar that Pepsi also owns. But Celsius, absolutely, by far the most dominant grower in our group. And like you said, this is a small company compared to, or small brand compared to, you know, a Monster, which dominates the market, or even a Red Bull. And so I think Celsius has a lot of room to run from a competitive landscape. The pie is growing in energy drinks. Mm-hmm. And so I think Pepsi's investment in that is really well timed and kind of shows the power of that company, which is ticker symbol CELH.
Andy, let's expand upon that a little bit more. Obviously, you offered some of the explanation as to why this is a fast-growing segment, kind of lifestyle changes. But if this is the fastest-growing segment amongst these kind of beverage conglomerates, which is really what I think of as of Pepsi and Coca-Cola. They're less about innovation themselves. They kind of just accumulate and acquire businesses as they kind of prove concept at this point, as it's cheaper than innovating on their own. Are we looking at these companies as now kind of competing versus each other within their energy segment, or are the real competitors traditional ways of getting caffeine, like let's say Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts? And how does this space compare to maybe some of the growth trajectory you see in the traditional coffee space?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when you look at a Starbucks, they've had a lockdown on what you could call caffeinated beverages for a long time. I mean, people were, if not physically, they were mentally addicted at least to stopping at Starbucks every morning. And Starbucks, what did they do? They leveraged that situation up by adding food to their menu in a really successful way and really increased the value of each ticket that came out the door. And it's kind of the opposite of Pepsi, which owns, as Kevin loves to say, they own all the O's, the Fritos, the Doritos, all of that. And what they can do with the shelf space that they have in grocery stores and gas stations is really remarkable, because once they get a partnership with a company or launch a new product, they have extraordinary power to leverage up their relationships, the distribution networks that they already have in place, and say, you're going to give us more shelf space for XYZ brand, and within days it's done. And so I think that type of power is really hard to replicate for other startup companies. And so their best bet, almost their only bet, is to partner with a company like Pepsi, who, like you said, Alex, has been very successful at that type of strategy in the past.
Andy, what else are you seeing in this segment? Are there any smaller brands, even smaller than Celsius? I mean, Coke, the whole sports hydration now, away from sugar, away from all these other things, not really decreasing the demand for energy drinks, just away from the sugar part. Are there any other firms? Are you seeing any other data that our viewers should know about?
Well, I do think that this bleeds over into alcoholic beverages as well.
There's the next thing, right?
Yeah, this low sugar and low or zero carbonation movement is really starting to take hold across the board, whether it's hard spiked drinks or soft drinks or energy drinks. Kind of everyone's looking for that low sugar, low carbonation alternative. I know that last week we spoke about Constellation Holdings and their portfolio and how well they had bet on some of those types of approaches, and how others had gone completely off the radar into the spiked seltzers and the heavily carbonated stuff. And so, I think this is just something that investors can keep in mind when they're looking at these companies, broader portfolios or smaller companies that may be betting on one or two products. Is that in line with the consumer preference that is taking hold? And the consumer preference that's taking hold right now, 100%, is improving energy, lower sugar, and no carbonation. And if a company's got all three of those boxes checked, I think they've got a tailwind at their back in otherwise tough economic conditions.
Andy, real quick before we let you go, you watch a lot of these trends. Is this stuff that kind of just blows with the wind, or is there real legs to some of these trends that you're seeing, this shift towards healthier drinks?
No, we can see these types of trends take hold for a really long time, and everything that we're seeing about low sugar, low carbonation, and higher energy does have all of those signals of being a long-lasting trend. I think even the Pepsi CEO on the last call said something like, sugar reduction is still the future of this industry, and I think that kind of forward-looking out of the chief officer is a pretty good sign for the company moving forward.
No doubt. So much irony in that, but we'll leave that there. Andy Swan, thanks as always for joining us, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Kev, let's trade some